Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have Susan Hobson. Susan, excited to have you on the show.
Whoop, whoop. Excited to be here, Gresh. Thank you so much for having me. Let's get this party started.
Let's get it started. And there's no better place to be than with Susan doing some really awesome things. And of course, before we jump into the party and hear about all the awesome things you're doing, what I want to do is just read a little bit more about Susan so you can hear about some of those awesome things. And Susan is a high performance leadership coach, published author, founder, and CEO of Elite High Performance Inc., host of the podcast, the Leadership Launchpad Project, and a member of the Forbes Coach Council. Susan has been in the leading industry for 15 years, working with some of the world's highest performing people and their teams. Professional athletes, C-suite executives, entrepreneurs, and many of the world's leading tech companies like Google. And I was listening to one of the interviews that Susan did, and she said something that really kind of stuck with me during the pandemic. She said that adversity is just the opportunity for growth. And I think so many times we don't realize like how powerful our mindset is and how we can change our perspective so that we kind of see those opportunities. And I think she has a phenomenal story, which I'm sure we're going to jump into. She played women's hockey. She won a national championship at NWHL Cup, all the things Susan has done. So excited to have you on, Susan. Are you ready to speak to the IMCO community?
I am so ready. Thank you so much for such a generous introduction. I always find it slightly awkward to hear all of that said in my presence, but boy, oh boy, has it been quite the journey. So where do you want to plug in first? You want to hear a little bit about my backstory in terms of how I even came to do all of this thing with, this mission that we're on here at Team Elite to change the way the game of life, leadership, and business is being played forever through something we like to call Leadership 2.0. This is the new school, neuroscience-backed, data and research-driven, best leadership practices, in my humble opinion, here in 2024. But yeah, how does this little girl from Canada, right, end up working with some of the highest performing people on the planet, leaders on the planet? So yeah, it's very interesting, actually. And maybe it'll make sense to your audience, right? What do you think of, Gresh, when you think of Canada? Go. What are your immediate associations?
My first thing is because we were talking about snow. So I'm going to go with snow. I'm going to think hockey. I'm going to think I'm a basketball fan. So Grizzlies, Vancouver Grizzlies, Toronto Raptors. Absolutely. Those are my things.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, definitely the second thing on your list. And I guess even the first one kind of goes into the second one. But hockey was our export, right? So as a little girl growing up in Toronto, my parents, they knew how to plant them seeds in my mindset. So they told me if I wanted to go on and pursue higher education, that I had to get really good at hockey, because I was told when I was a little girl, dreaming of playing in the NHL for the Boston Bruins, that was not possible for us girls. And so the best thing I could really shoot for back in the 80s, I mean, we weren't even in the Olympics, us women yet, was higher education. So that's what I did. I got on my mission. I got really good at my sport. And I was lucky enough at 14 to get offered a hockey scholarship to one of your elite prestigious boarding schools in New England there, where I then got recruited to go on to the Ivy Leagues, to Princeton. And that's when I went from being this big fish in a small pond, used to being on the ice all the time, used to getting A's in the classroom all the time, to being this little minnow in the ocean. Overnight I was thrust into one of the most competitive environments on the damn planet. And I had no idea how to operate in those conditions. And so of course, like many of the high achievers I work with today, slammed my head into that brick wall, going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Because I quickly realized I had a really bad case of imposter syndrome. I didn't know who I was if I wasn't on the ice scoring goals, or I wasn't in the class getting A's. And so I just went into a tailspin in my performance. And so that was this really pinnacle moment in my hero's journey, where with my finger 2 inches from the eject button, right? I don't belong here. I'm an imposter. I want to go home. Was actually, because these fancy Ivy League schools, once you get through those gates, they'll do almost anything to make sure you get out onto the other side, right? So I got hooked up with somebody like me. I started to learn that performance was 90% mental. I had never in all my training and all my years even been exposed to that fact. And I, right there, as a highly intuitive young woman, took notice. I was like, why do I have to get to the top 1% of my sport to even learn about the 90% that makes me successful? Something wrong with that equation right now. And when I learned about the power of mindset, right, and how it's governing almost everything in terms of my actual performance, and I saw the turnaround when I actually was exposed to that, which was that I went from being a bench rider of the century, I lovingly refer to myself my freshman year, getting C's and D's for the first time in my life in the classroom, to being on the leading lineup, one of the top scorers on the national dean's list with my grades by my sophomore year. I was like, what is this? Like, I was put into this fancy institution for a reason. This is what I got to go out into the world and scream from the rooftops. Like, this is a crime that we are not teaching this stuff in schools, in the grassroots of our sports. And then when I got into the working world on my mission after playing professional hockey and winning all that stuff you talked about at the top of the show, and I got into big business, I started to see, oh my gosh, it's happening in big business too. Like, business professionals don't understand that performance is 90% mental, and it's mostly due to the mindset strategies that they're operating on. And that's when I really started to hit the ground running in my efforts to become a high performance mindset coach. I wanted to prop up my elite athletes and teach them this stuff. I wanted to prop up my high achieving professionals and teach them this stuff. But then I quickly realized that I was sending them both into these 1.0 led conditions, right, with leaders who didn't have the mindset strategies either. And so that's when I was like really, really clear. My mission needed to be that. That was where the disruption needed to live. That's where we were going to change the world, right? By getting these strategies into the mindsets of the leaders who would then be empowered to trickle that all the way down to the front lines, whether that was sport or business. So that's the backstory. And that's why I'm so passionate about this, because I just think it's a crime, right? That we have to hit a brick wall or a glass ceiling and have pain be the thing that awakens us to our untapped potential. What's up with that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be a better way, and I love that you figured out that you're going to provide that better way. And I can't hear your passion at all. I feel like you're not passionate at all with all the awesome things that you're doing. But I absolutely love the story, and I love that. I think so many times we find out the tools or the secrets to everything, and we sometimes can hoard them and say, hey, we're not going to share those. Oh, I didn't realize this, so let me hold on to this, and then we not share that out. But I love that you took those secrets and you've been able to kind of run with them, not just to help out yourself and I imagine the people that you're working with, but to help out the world at a whole, and the people, the leaders, the family. All those things happen, I imagine, when you start to realize like how impactful the mindset and how that impacts your life, your business, and everything in between and all around.
Yeah, so we're in it to win it together on this planet, right? Like, we really, really, we're sharing the world, right? So why aren't we trying to get out that front door every day and empower one another with what we know? You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of world I know I want to live in. That's the kind of world I'm raising my daughter, hopefully, to want to live in and contribute, to. But yeah, I mean, obviously that's a really intrinsic sense of motivation. And I think that's the beauty of also doing the work, isn't it? Is that you really start to see what matters when you start to dig into your mindset and you start to go on this whole personal development journey, right? You start to see, like, society kind of gets us off track and gets us to value some of the wrong things along the way when it's not exposing us to these tools and these strategies.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why I think it's just such a gift that you're sharing this and you're doing this in such an impactful way. I almost wonder, and I don't know, if you have, perspective on this, you having gone through that experience, I almost feel like those things happen for a reason. If you had not been that minnow in a big ocean, if you didn't have that experience where things weren't going as, and I think I heard this in another interview that you did, sometimes when you're a high achiever, you're doing things and it's happening so naturally, so easily to some degree to the outside person that you don't realize like what's on the other side when things don't go your way. But do you feel like going through that experience has kind of put you in a place where you were able to learn those lessons, able to realize that, hey, everybody doesn't know all this. I didn't know all this, so let me share this out. Do you feel like that happened for a reason?
Yeah, I think everything happens for a reason. But I'm a highly spiritual person. So I just think like that's the way I orient myself in the world. I think, we don't know that we need to know these things until we have a reason that gets our attention. Now, do we? That's the whole hero's journey story arc, right? In every single movie, every single book that we read or are read as children, like that's why we're here as human beings, is that we all kind of start out kind of unconscious, right? And we're just perpetuating the models that we had in our homes or in our schools or in our ranks or TV sets, right? Like we're just exposed to these things and we're relatively unaware in the first chapters of our life. But I think, it's inevitable for every single human being that you're going to hit a brick wall or a glass ceiling. And especially if you're a high achiever, because the high achiever, their mindset strategies are not sustainable, right? They're deficit strategies that are based on a scarcity mindset. They're orienting themselves to go outside in, meaning that they seek to control the outside variables so that they can get what they need to feel on the inside. And we all know that that's a ticking time bomb now, don't we? We just went through a pandemic, so I think we all know it now.
Right.
There's no way for us to be able to perpetually sustain strategies that are externally based. And that's the way that we're all hooked up and hardwired, as kids, as adolescents, as teenagers. So yeah, I do believe it happened for a reason.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I think I was listening to something. You were saying there's a big difference between being, correct me if I'm wrong, high achiever versus a high performer. And that high achiever, I think you were talking about, is a little bit more of the outwardly based or like, I got to prove this person wrong, or this person said that I wasn't good enough. So let me work and just, I don't want to say flame out, but sometimes you don't have enough in the tank to continue to kind of prove that person wrong, versus a high performer, which I guess is a little bit different in a lot of what you help people to do.
Yeah, I think the high achiever thinks they're striving, because that's what it looks like to the outside world, right? Woo, million miles an hour, pedal to the metal. And most people don't realize striving is actually surviving in the nervous system. That's what I'm calling scarcity, folks. It comes from a space and place of deficit. It comes from the belief that we are not safe, that we are not good enough. And that creates a deficit of what we need psychologically and emotionally to be okay in ourselves, right? And so what we see as striving is actually high achievers just waking up and having to hit the ground running so that they can go secure that external validation as a form of safety. Because the nervous system needs validation in order to survive. It's a part of how we're hardwired as human beings. And so the difference here with the high performer is that they reorient themselves to go inside out in their mindset strategies. That means that they know where to go inside of themselves, no matter where they are, no matter what's going on around them in their environment, to be able to get their needs met, and intrinsically validating who they are and the value that they have and what they have to contribute to the world that is valuable. Like, you could throw me in any high performance situation and I'll be able to regulate my nervous system because I know where to go inside of myself. And that's a game changer for anybody who cares about achieving optimal results, when you really think about it now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's the battle for control. And that's what high achievers are really obsessed with, right? Is control. But they're trying to secure it in things outside themselves. That's a torturous way to live. When you secure control on the inside, now you can start to go from surviving to thriving, right? Because now all of a sudden you get to show up in flow, which is a peak state It produces peak level results in a highly sustainable, self-renewing way that leads to fulfillment. And that, at the end of the day, is also why we're here as human beings.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I almost feel like, I'm a big, big basketball fan growing up. And I almost feel like, I don't know if you found this too, that there's so much narrative around the negative kind of helping fuel, especially athletes, in terms of being great, that you don't nearly hear as much around that high performance part of like how they're going within. And I feel like there's not enough information or narrative about that. And I feel like you've had that same experience to some degree, which is why you're doing a lot of the work that you're doing and doing so many phenomenal things.
Yeah, totally. That's the thing I think is so tragic. It's like, I see it in leadership too, right? Why
Hmm.
don't we, on average, get leadership training and development opportunities until the average age of 42 years old or 10 years in a leadership role? It's like putting someone out on the road to drive for 10 years and then giving them a license or a driving test or a driving class. Like, what? It doesn't make any sense to me, right? We're setting people up to fail. No wonder the average, executive, he fails or gets fired in the first 16 to 18 months, like 50 to 60% of new executives. They got 16 to 18 months before they're
Mm,
tanked because they're not set up, right? To be able to handle the
right.
pressure, to be able to know how to empower their people. They don't have the playbook. And then we see all of this in terms of trying to put out fires and course correct after the fact, which is kind of what you were seeing with me. I'm a highly recruited athlete, one of the top recruits in the world. They had to fight to get me on their team. But then I come on to campus and my whole first year is wasted because I didn't have any of what I needed to operate in those conditions optimally.
Mm,
To me, it's not only a waste of that human resource, but the suffering that ensues in the lives of the human beings who have to then experience that type of brick wall experience. That to me is really why I'm so passionate, because I think burnout's never been higher. Disengagement has never been higher. People are suffering. And that's a lot of the reason why is because of the leaders and the managers that don't have the tools, the resources, or the strategies. So what are we doing, folks? Like, let's set our people up to win rather than to fail. Doesn't that make business sense?
yeah. Absolutely. And I think when you approach it from an abundant mindset, you don't have to think win lose. You think win, 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 win. And that's why I love everything, the work that you do and the impact that you have, because it ends up being disservice not being able to kind of let people know about this and being able to kind of help them to be empowered in order to, see that success come to a fruition. So absolutely love that. So I wanted to drill down more, hear a little bit more on how you're working with your clients and what that looks like, what that process looks like. And of course, hear a little bit more on what I like to call your secret sauce, what you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique.
Well, I think the thing that really sets us apart and makes us unique in the leadership development space is the fact that I chose 15 years ago to specialize in the area of mindset. The Harvard Business
Mhm.
Review now backs this up, right? Because one of the best silver linings I'm seeing coming out of this pandemic is all the research that we see, right? All the data that we have now available to us. So they did a research project last year where they looked at the 356 billion annual global dollars spent on leadership development and training and found that a whopping 75% of that training was rated completely ineffective, meaning it did not impact a
Wow.
damn result. Why?
Wow.
Because the 25% that were effective were the ones that knew to go to the step of death known as mindset in their leadership development and training. Why is that such a differentiating factor? Because you cannot affect behavior modification unless you go to the step of death known as mindset. Most people don't realize this, right? Like when they just try to stick it in a weekend workshop,
Mhm.
right? Or get somebody in there to do a big motivational speech. It's great. Motivation will get you going, right? But it's the consistency of doing the brain training, which is what I like to call mindset work as an athlete. That just makes sense to me. That consistently keeps you going and growing and changing in your behavioral patterns. And to me, hello, leadership is a set of behaviors after all. So if you're not going to the step of death known as mindset, how are you affecting behavior modification with your leaders? Another thing, I'm just like, I don't get it. So I think that's definitely our secret sauce is the mindset strategy architecture work that we do. And so what does that look like? That looks like my leaders coming through the door and me knowing how to get behind the gates, which is what I like to call the subconscious mind, right? It's like that iceberg, you know, you only see like the little tip in terms of what we're consciously aware of. The other whopping majority, like 95 to 97% of the choices that we make as leaders a day are being governed by your autopilot. They're being governed by your subconscious mind. And that's where the mindset lives. Okay. That is where the playbook of beliefs live. The beliefs are the way that you filter everything, starting with the way you see yourself and therefore relate to yourself as a leader, which then sets up and predicts how you're going to relate to the world and your people. And that's what triggers emotion. And then that emotion is what governs decisions towards or away from anything. That's how the brain keeps us safe and alive. So that's the way I work with my leaders. I go to the step of depth known as the mindset. I penetrate their belief systems. I help them understand the strategies that they're working on. I help them see where those strategies are a bit maladaptive, right? Meaning they're going outside in to try to seek control. That's really the majority of the leaders that come through my door who haven't done the work. They're the 1.0 kind of old school leaders who have been taught the command and control style of old school leadership where it's like power over my people. I'm the authoritarian versus awakening the power within, right? Which is what all this new school stuff is about. But that's how I work. I penetrate their mindset, which means getting into their playbook of beliefs, really illuminating the strategies that they're working on so I can help to deconstruct the ones that are kind of old school and broken and really replace them by re-architecting these intrinsically based 2.0 strategies that are highly adaptive, which means that they're going to get optimal results in both themselves from a results perspective and with their people and their teams. And ultimately, I'm empowering them to go through a process of doing that work. I like to call it brain training, but it's the subconscious mind. It's re-hardwiring. It's reprogramming. It's doing all of that at the subconscious level that you then see starts to manifest in different choices and different patterns of behavior, which obviously takes them from here to here in terms of their results.
Nice. I absolutely love that. I love the phrase kind of brain training as well too, because I think inherent in it, I think so many times we can, I think I forgot the opposite of the fixed mindset, but fixed mindset
Growth.
versus I think an abundant growth mindset. Thank
Yeah.
you. And I think so many times when we think it's fixed, we don't think about training our brain or things that we could do to kind of, basically change our life, change our business, change all those things and how that can happen by training. We automatically think this is who I am. This is where I'm going to be. And I think that again is a disservice, not only for that person, but also the gifts, the impact, all the things that person can have. And I love that you have committed, your life, your energy, your talents, your gifts, all the things to do that work, to be able to make that impact.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate. It's kind of the way we're set up, right? Like we're taught we go to
Yeah.
school, then we have these learning years, and then we graduate, and then we're in a totally different phase of our lives where now we go to work with the lunch pail and like the time card. And that's why I'm like trying to disrupt all this 1.0 stuff, right? Because I get it in like a factory era. That makes sense. That's not the era we're in. We're in 2024, people. Like we got to keep going and growing until the rocking chair. Like that we're human beings. It's the nature of ourselves. We're constantly evolving and changing in our bodies. Do you think our brains are any different? And by the way, have we all noticed what's happening in big business? It's quite disruptive right now in terms of the rate of growth of technology. So if we're not continuing to go and grow, how are we keeping up with the ever-changing, increasing demands and pressures of the marketplace? I mean, the economy, look at the economy right now. Like we have to keep going and growing so that we can rise to meet the level of pressure that certainly every leader on the planet is feeling right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to have that evolution, and a lot of that we forget about, like how powerful the mind is, and how having that training can definitely lead us towards that. So, absolutely appreciate that. So, I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I want to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. So, this could be like an app, a book, or even a habit that you have. But what's something that makes you more effective and efficient?
Something that makes me more effective and efficient, and I don't think you're going to be expecting this one, but
Okay.
this is definitely my favorite hack, which is meditation. And I'll
Ah,
tell you why that's such a hack, even for us CEOs, because I like to give this advice to my CEO clients as much as I like to live in the integrity of the advice that I give my clients, because I too am a CEO, right? But
mhm.
meditation for me is like one of the quickest hacks in terms of how to get myself into a parasympathetic response. For those of us out there who are not neuroscience geeks like myself, the parasympathetic state of the nervous system, that's when we're grounded. That's when we're most highly resourceful, which means we have access to the greatest amount of resources back here in the warehouse of old information known as our subconscious mind. Most people think, like, again, high achievers, they think the sympathetic response, pedal to the metal, right, is
Yeah.
peak state, And I used to think that early on my hockey games. I was laying girls out, I was all hyped up. I thought that was passion. But yeah, no, when you want to actually like get into a state of flow, that's when you actually have to gear down your nervous system,
Mm.
right? Because when you're in a state of flow, it's actually more of a calm, confident place to be. But yeah, it's the most resourceful. So if you're talking about efficiency and you're talking about productivity, then taking even just 5 minutes to just meditate and ground your nervous system, you're going to see is one of the easiest ways to trip the switch on a flow state. And that's been scientifically proven to be the most productive state of them all.
Nice. Well, I appreciate you breaking that down. And yeah, I'm definitely people, so I didn't know about the parasympathetic. I could barely say it. I don't even know if I said it correctly.
You
State
did, you
and how
did,
powerful that is. I did. I did. There we
you
go. Thank you.
did.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
But I think so many times we forget, like sometimes in order to like solve problems or even to go quote unquote faster or be more efficient and effective, that we have to do the kind of antithesis of it, the opposite of it, to be able to make that happen, to be able to kind
Mm-hmm.
of slow down or to meditate in order to think more creatively. I think be more effective, be more efficient. Sometimes we don't think about that. We think about grind and doing more in order to get that. And again, that sounds a lot like the 1.0 mentality that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't unlock the opportunity that we could have in this world, and of course in the business.
I love that you said that, because I think that is, again, it's the misnomer, right? Like we associate speed with better, just like we associate bigger
Mm,
with better. And it's totally whack. Like it's totally backwards in the associations. There's a saying in neuroscience, you actually speed up by slowing down,
mm,
which means that you're able to accelerate your rate of growth when you actually slow down and gear down into a parasympathetic response for all these reasons that we just mentioned, right? Is like you're more productive, you're more efficient, you're more creative, you're more innovative, you solve problems better. But I also want to speak to my CEOs out there, my leaders. You are at the front of that locker room setting that tone. The number one play in the Leadership 2.0 playbook is the model carries the most weight. And what that
mm,
means is only 7% of what your influence as a leader is going to be at the front of the room is based on what you're saying in the verbal
mm.
language that you use, the words that you use. The other whopping 93% is just the way that you are in your model. 55% is communicated by your body language. The other 38% is the energy, the inflection in your voice. We have burnout the most rampant it's ever been. Do you think we need you at the front of the room all jacked up? That's a stress
Right,
response. That's
right.
what sympathetic overdrive is. You are pressing your stress into your people if you're at the front of the room in that kind of a state. So our process, we like to start with leadership development in regards to self-responsibility, right? Which is take responsibility for the
Mm.
state that you are in, because that is the thing that's going to carry the most weight in terms of your impact and influence on your people, on your teams, on your results.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. I think so many times, and I think it's like the rule where as soon as we point towards somebody and say you need to do X, Y, and Z, and A, B, and C, we have three, four other fingers pointing back at us, and we can take the responsibility because a lot of times what we're looking at is a reflection of sometimes the work that we haven't done or the work that needs to be done, and a lot of times we start out with ourselves, especially as leaders. It's going to impact us, but also impact the senior leadership, the people that are working on a regular, whatever it is. It just creates that reverberation and that domino effect that affects the overall culture and the families and everything as a result of doing that work.
And I think that's part of the social responsibility piece too, right? Like, you
Mm,
know, you have a tremendous responsibility as a leader. You impact so many lives. And by the way you impact those lives at work trickles into their homes, trickles
right.
into their communities, trickles into our world. It's a ripple effect that ensues because the visibility, you know, and responsibility of the CEO, especially, that carries the most weight. Everybody is looking to the top to know how to feel about what's going on, especially in an economic downturn, right? Or a pandemic or
Yeah.
whatever the latest chapter of adversity is in this thing called life. So let's take that responsibility seriously, right? And let's think about how, yeah, we want our legacy to be someday, right? Like take responsibility for a ripple effect. And that starts with the way that you show up and develop and lead yourself. That's why we say that's the number one play in the playbook of Leadership 2.0.
Nice. I absolutely love that. It's the quote that in order to change the world, we have to change ourselves. And I think once we start to have that mentality and that mindset and the actions that follow, it starts to really, hit another level. So what would you consider to be what I call a CEO nugget? A little bit more word of wisdom or piece of advice. I like to say it might be something you would tell your favorite business client, or if you hopped into a time machine, you might tell your younger business self.
I think it's where we started, just to bring this whole thing full circle, right? Which was when you
Hmm.
heard me riffing on this whole adversity is just the opportunity for growth, dressed up and disguised
Hmm.
as adversity, you know? Like, I just remember like one of my first brick walls, actually, when I didn't even mention this, is when I went to prep school. I ended up getting diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is a stress
Oh,
disease.
wow.
And this is because I did not have the playbook. I did not know how to get this amazing
Mhm.
opportunity to go away to the States, right? Like totally unprepared for the pressure I was going to be thrust into. And so I was just like trying to be perfect and I was trying to please everybody. And of course, that meant sacrificing my damn self. And that meant I was so stressed on the inside, striving on the outside, but just surviving on the inside because I was so self sacrificial by pressing my stress inside as if that was like going to make it go away. And so
Mhm.
I wish I had known that that was going to put me on my purpose driven mission, which brought me here to all of you today, right? To do this work that I consider my life's calling. I wish I had known that because obviously, I think as human beings, we all got to experience pain because pain in human beings is what awakens us to the untapped potential that we got going
Mhm.
on back there, right? So don't be afraid of the adversity. I like to retrain my clients' experience in their brains specifically by getting them excited when the adversity hits because there's always, always, always going to be a tremendous opportunity for growth buried in that pain and that adversity. And that takes us from being in the victim mindset, which is like, oh, why is this happening to me? Right? To being in what I like to call the victor mindset, which is like,
Mm.
all right, why is this challenge showing up today? What is this here to teach me? And I actually get excited because I know that that's thrusting me into this unknown, what I like to call growth zone. You know, it's the guaranteed growth zone. When I'm thrust outside of my comfort zone because I'm challenged in some sort of a way, I'm guaranteed to discover more and more of my capacity. And so for a high performer, that's literally our number one value, right? Is growth so that we can continue to impact and serve this world. So yeah, I'd love that nugget to be something that everybody listening starts to brain train in their own mindset, right? Is like, how can I become the victor rather than the victim when that adversity hits. Like, how can I get curious and dig in rather than hiding away in avoidance? And really just start to play with some of those opportunities for growth.
Yeah, that ends up being such a powerful place to be because it almost, and I really love, like, even to myself saying the quote that everything doesn't happen to me, it happens for me. And I think a lot of times when you start to realize that, you start to say that, okay, those roadblocks happen, speed bumps, whatever they are, like you said, you start to say, okay, this is the opportunity for me to win. I'm excited about this. I'm running towards that because I know that on the other side of that speed bump, on the other side of roadblock, whatever it is, I'm going to be a different person and I'm going to be making more of an impact. I'm going to reach more of my capacity. I'm going to see and learn more about myself. So it ends up becoming a really exciting opportunity. So I can definitely see like why you run towards that, and see like this is my opportunity to kind of shine and grow. And of course, as we talked about, win.
Yeah, I think it's what people don't see is on the backside of the brain. It's like if it's a pain association, our brain wants to close up and protect us, right? But if
Right.
it's a pleasure association, because we're excited, because we already know and anticipate there's going to be growth on the other side of that, right? That's pleasure. And so it just motivates this brain to want to open up shop and give access to the resources that we're going to need to actually be able to go out there and find more and more of that capacity. So that's a wicked little brain training mindset strategy for your folks.
Yes, absolutely love that. I appreciate you sharing that. So now I want to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And our goal is to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So Susan, what does being a CEO mean to you?
I think being a CEO means having the potential to help optimize the potential of your people, which starts by having the opportunity to realize max potential in yourself. Like we said, that's where the responsibility begins. But ultimately, when you capitalize on both of those, because you actually see being a CEO as that, then really having the opportunity to help our world optimize its untapped potential.
Mm.
And that to me is,
That
again, why we're here and why we're lucky enough to be in this seat known as being a CEO.
Absolutely. And it ends up being such a powerful thought to have. Like, I think so many times we don't realize the responsibility, the impact that you can have as a CEO, entrepreneur, business owner. Honestly, us as individuals, we start to realize that we forget about the human aspect of business, forget about the human aspect of life at that. And once you realize the impact that you have, and by tapping into your potential, understanding your potential and how that creates that domino effect, you get to really see the world be better as a result of how you are approaching, how you're thinking about it, what you're doing. All those things start to happen, and it creates a really, I think, phenomenal flow and environment, and just really phenomenal things just start to happen from there. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Well, Susan, truly appreciate that definition.
Amen.
And of course, I appreciate your time even more. So what I want to do now is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional that you can let our readers and listeners know. And of course, how best people get a hold of you, find out about your podcast, find out about all the awesome things you and your team are working on.
Last call for everybody listening. This world has never needed 2.0 leaders more than it does in this very moment of history of time. So if you are lucky enough to be a CEO out there carrying all that weight that we just talked about, I really, really hope that this interview has inspired you to step into, that self-responsibility, so that you can really make sure you're powering yourself in all the ways that are going to set the model for your people to thrive, right, and feel empowerment because of. And you know what? If you're listening and that's not currently your mindset or your perspective or even the way that you're relating to yourself or the opportunity of being a CEO, then I hope you'll come and find me and let me shed some of my passion your way, because I definitely take this seat on my bus very seriously. And there's nothing that fulfills me more than getting the opportunity to spread that kind of mindset strategy onto leaders who really want to get on that legacy leadership journey, right? And learn how to show up as a 2.0 leader. And listen, if you don't have that playbook, we get it. We just talked about all the reasons why you probably don't. And it's totally cool. But yeah, I would be so honored to have the opportunity to inspire and empower you in any way, shape, or form that I can. So the best way for that to happen is to come book some time with me. I'm very generous in the way that I donate my time to any CEOs or leaders out there who just want to come and riff with me in terms of where they're at in their leadership journey. You can find my contact information and a form to be able to book time with me on my website, elitehighperformance.com. You can find out everything about all the many opportunities you have to work with us here at Team Elite. I've got a dream team of coaches working all over the world so we can serve the world. We've got everything from one-on-one leadership coaching to leadership locker rooms, we like to call them, because I'm an athlete and I see everything through that lens. But those are our leadership development programs where we like to run our leadership teams through this 2.0 training. So whether it's you or your teams, we've got that there too. We've also got the #3 leadership podcast in Canada, so you can come check us out there, the Leadership Launchpad Project on every major podcast platform. We get to interview the world's foremost leaders and experts in the 2.0 space every single week on that show. Those shows drop every Monday morning for your inspo on your way to work. And then, yeah, if not, if you just want to come and get some of my inspiration through my thought leadership, then you can find me on LinkedIn, Susan Hobson, or Instagram, Susan L. Hobson. I think that's probably enough places for you to come and plug into some of what we've got going on here at Team Elite.
Nice. I truly appreciate you for making it easier for everybody to plug in. Of course, to make it even easier, we're going to have the links and information as well in the show notes so that everybody can follow up with you, subscribe, listen to the podcast, have that conversation, all those things, so they can find out about all the things that you are doing. But truly appreciate you for taking some time out with us today. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your expertise, your knowledge, all the things that you shared with us today. And I really love everything that you've been able to do. But I think one of the things that really stuck out with me is that sometimes we don't realize that we're in the 1.0 mindset. But I think the most powerful thing is we realize that we can go to the 2.0 mindset. And sometimes that is by going with others and being able to lean on others and their expertise and knowledge. So thank you so much for doing that work so that we can do that work. And I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
Gretch, we have to get you on the show is the last thing I want to say. And yeah, obviously I'm a very passionate gal, but your highest potential literally is my passion. And I'm just excited to get the opportunity to unleash that together in any capacity, way, shape, or form that I can. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to serve your crowd. I really deeply appreciate you, sir.
No problem. I appreciate that, ma'am. Thank you.